Graveyard shift workers of Reddit, what crazy, creepy, unbelievable things have you seen working in the dead of night? Part 1. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. One of my friends had a job in the hospital looking after patients, making beds etc. I heard he randomly quit his job, wouldn't talk to anyone about it. I bring some beers over to his house and try to see if I can get him talking. He's a total emotional wreck. Finally get him to talk, and he says that he was working one night in the hospital when he heard a nurse shouting for help because someone was going into cardiac arrest. So he runs down a hallway and some man runs towards him. They almost bump into each other and the man shouts, "Where's the exit?" My friend points to the exit, then runs into the room with the man going into cardiac arrest, only to see it's the exact same person who ran past him in the hallway. He died in front of his eyes. Was staying up late for finals a few years back, and our library is open 24 hours during finals week. It was snowing outside and I walked back to my car and was sitting in it letting it warm up when I see the old security guard. This guy has to be 80 years old, Fu Manchu mustache, and drives around in a golf cart. Well, I see him kind of cruising along the sidewalk and he gets to the icy parking lot. He puts the pedal to the metal and starts flying across the lot. About halfway across the lot he slams on the brakes and does the sickest spin out I have ever seen, and then continues on his merry way. One of the funniest things I've ever witnessed. I used to work as a night auditor at a Hilton hotel, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Homeless people with MRSA, flesh-eating infections, wandering in at 3 a.m. on cold, freezing nights and refusing to leave. Our security team would have to call the police, which would upset them. There was one incident in particular where a vagrant got upset with our security guy and ran up to him and hugged him, and started trying to bite him to try and infect him. My security guy threw him down and proceeded to beat the holy hell out of him, got blood everywhere. Hazmat unit came out, and we had to close down the lobby while the area was cleansed. We never heard from the security guy again, or what his status was. I worked security for a small Midwestern college on the midnight shift every Saturday night. Crazy crap happened nearly every week. One night, I stepped out of a building and heard gunshots in the bad neighborhood just off campus. Sure enough, the police chased the bad guys onto campus and it was just like an episode of Cops. My job was to keep the gawkers away. Of course, I didn't have a gun or Kevlar vest. Cops got the shooters and the gun. Along the way I dealt with lots of drunks, sent a few to the hospital, one with 385 BAC, and various smartass, entitled rich kids. Scariest situations, though, were always the suicide attempts. One tried to stand in front of a train. She was the scariest. The look in her eyes told me she had given up. Thank God we got to her in time. Later on she got her Ph.D. in psychology. I live in Singapore. Every able-bodied guy who turned 18 had to serve in the army, compulsory national service. So I was serving the army on an offshore island army camp. Like most tropical islands, it's a jungle. We all had to do guard duties, and one night, when I was doing my guard duty, my buddy and I were prowling around the camp. At one stage, around 4 a.m., as we were walking along the perimeter of the camp, I had the sudden urge to pee. So I walked up to the edge of the jungle, stood next to a tree, and did my business. Halfway through, my buddy who was along the perimeter, about 10 meters away, started to make this whimpering noise, and urgently whispered to me, "Hurry, damn it." I finished, buttoned up and walked back towards him to see fear in his eyes, and he grabbed my hand and dashed away. "What?" I said. I stopped, pushed his hands away and looked back. He had continued running as I looked back. And I saw a person sitting on a branch of the tree I was peeing on, long hair covering the face, in white dirty gown. I turned and chased after my buddy. Thankfully that was the last guard duty for me before I got posted to the mainland again. I took a break from my shift, around 4 a.m. in the morning, and I spent 15 minutes watching a raccoon and homeless man foraging on the sidewalk and heading towards each other. The fun part was neither noticed each other until the homeless man nearly stepped on the raccoon, and they both had a "oh shit" moment. After that they continued foraging on, went on their way. Best 15 minutes ever. I know it says creepy, crazy, unbelievable, but I just thought it was fun to witness this little event. TL. Dr. Nothing is going on at 4 a.m. Was working late at Kroger once, and at around midnight some big, burly black dude comes strolling in with an empty cart and tries to leave with about 7 cases of beer. Now before I could do anything, my manager, about 5'6" came sprinting up to the dude and asked this dude, about 6 feet, if he paid. Obviously he's lying and he realizes that he has to bail quick. So the black dude makes a speed dash for his whale of a car, probably his wife's minivan, and my manager gave chase. Now the dude hopes into his swaggin' wagon and tries to haul ass out of there, but not until my manager literally Hulk grips his license plate and rips it off. Keep in mind my manager is small, probably 150 pounds. I just stood there while he held the dude's plates in his hands like some kind of medieval trophy. I learned never to mess with my manager again. I used to work the overnight shift in a 24-hour pharmacy. 4 different people stick out in my mind. 1, the woman who was obviously on her way to a club that night, but had the bare minimum of clothing on required by law during a snowstorm. She got pissed when one of the other guys on shift stared at her and yelled, "What, you haven't seen tits before?" 2, drunk man at about 3 a.m. screaming at the pharmacist and banging on the cage between the pharmacy and the rest of the store for security with his cane. He actually dented the metal bad enough in one place that the cage was hard to move back to its storage. When the cops came in, they called him by name, walked him into the car and never came back. 3, our night manager was pulling cash from the registers and putting it into a plastic bag. He then rings up a single customer and leaves the cash in the bag. Something like $1,200 went out the door. He was shitting bricks until the people came back and returned the money about 20 minutes later. 4, the kid, about 17, who came in with his tighty-whities wrapped around his hand covered in blood. Bought some gauze and peroxide and tried to pay with a bloody, as in 80% covered in blood and soggy, $5 bill. I said fuck it, take it, and I paid for him myself. I wasn't touching that, not for $7.50 an hour. Honorable mention the mentally handicapped man who came in with his aide. Both were drunk, and he had a nugget of shit roll down his leg onto the carpet right by the registers. Neither would admit to the fact he dropped a bowl brownie on the floor, and we were left to clear it up. I do 8-hour shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. I've never seen anything truly creepy, but we did at one point have a shadow cross one of the cameras, classic out of focus, vaguely hominid shape that one normally associates with security cameras and the supernatural. No one at Outsight could explain it. I assume it had to have been a moth that crawled across the lens in just the right pattern as to seem like a ghost. It's never happened again, so we all pretty much let the matter drop. On a related note, I have an unhealthy habit of reading no sleep and the like while I'm alone in a gatehouse in the middle of nowhere at 3 a.m. When you're doing that and the power goes out and you are the only one at the site, you may as well have been attacked by an army of white-faced, bleeding Slendermen for what it does to your heart. Do not recommend. I worked the graveyard shift in a gas station. I worked behind bulletproof glass and had a metal box that was used to pass items back and forth between me and customers. I was never robbed, but I was only there for 2 months. One thing I hated was passing the bathroom key to non-customers. Lots of times anyone asking for a bathroom key in the middle of the night are drug addicts looking to shoot up or drunks who are going to piss all over everything. The 2 worst. A bunch of drunken frat boys had taken to shooting up the neighborhood with paintball rounds. They nailed me a couple of times when I went outside. So I decided I wasn't going outside for anything. Then this one drunk came up and asked for the bathroom key. He tells me he's too drunk to open the door and wants me to open the door for him. I said I'm not coming out and handed him the key through the metal slot. So he takes the key and staggers to the back of the gas station, and I swear I could hear him constantly fiddling with those fucking keys all goddamn night because he can't fit them in the lock. It went on forever. ****, how fucking drunk are you for fuck's sake? ****, finally he gives up and brings the key back. Before he puts the key in the slot, he drops it onto the ground, whips out his cock and pissed all over the key, then put it in the steel box. I got pissed off and went outside to kick his ass. As soon as I opened the door, the whole front of the gas station was nailed with a barrage of paintballs. The fuckers were waiting for me in ambush behind a bunch of parked cars across the street. They hit that drunk worse than anything, and I took a couple of shots in the abdomen. I called the cops, but this was Abbotsford, BC, they just don't come. Not for shit like this. You can't even get them to show up, let alone arrest anyone. Anyway, after that I never opened the front door ever again. And they tried luring me out with this bullshit, like one comes up and said, "Oh hey, you got a fire over here. You better check it out. I got cameras, they showed no fire." Another time they said some guy got stabbed, better come out. WTF, so I look like a paramedic? Fuck you. Dial 911 on your cell phone and fuck off. Screw you, I'm not opening this door for anything. Eventually one night the frat boys got fed up and just shot up my windows with a couple of 100 rounds and buggered off. Anyway, sometime later some guy who filled up and paid in cash asked for the bathroom key. Then he comes back with the key. As soon as I slide out the metal box, he grabbed the box and yanked it out as hard as he could. Then these other come out of nowhere and also pull on the box, making it impossible for me to close it. It was those frat boys. As two of them held the box open, the one who returned the key drops his pants down to his ankles. Then two other guys picked him up and sat him on top of the metal box with his ass bare naked and hanging out. He proceeded to spray diuretic shit all over the inside of that box. 1 week later I moved the fuck out of that town. For ages I was just sick to death of the lawless bullshit I constantly had to put up with in that piece of shit, Abbotsford. I was operating a radar mounted on a van to assess the nocturnal migration patterns of birds, and worked all night every night in backcountry roads in the middle of nowhere. One night I glanced out the back van window, and saw a strange orange orb floating towards the van. I was tired, and even studied the radar screen real quick to see if anything registered. As it slowly moved closer and closer I began to panic and got out our night vision goggles, long story, and cut the interior lights. When I looked out using the goggles I saw a horse and buggy and a bearded fellow with a top hat staring at the van as he rode by. It was an Amish dude riding off somewhere at 2 a.m. with an old-fashioned lamp to light his way. I felt bad because being that close to the active radar was supposed to be dangerous to your eyes. I was a supervisor at a Kinko's on the graveyard shift a long time ago. People would bring in their sex pictures to get them color copied. I told you it was a long time ago. We had drunk girls come and photocopy their boobs. I also had an employee who would come in and do speed in the break room, which I wasn't too cool with, but then he'd do all the overnight work and vacuum and all kinds of crazy shit. Responded to an emergency call in the retirement home I work at. Every resident has a life alert pendant that alerts me when pressed. Knocked on the door. No answer. Knocked on the door. No answer. Unlocked the door and walked in, yelling that resident's name. No answer. Opened her bedroom door while yelling her name. Heard a response, "I am in here." She walked out of the bathroom and said she barricaded herself in there after seeing someone looking through her windows. The fucked up thing, she lives on the 4th floor. Found out later that she was suffering from the beginning stages of dementia. 2 different times I saw someone get on an elevator as I came around a corner. I said hold the door. As the door started to close, it opened back like someone had hit the button. When I got to the elevator there was no one in it. After that, many times just as I came around that corner, the elevator door would open, and no one was in the elevator. I had not pushed a call button or anything. I would always say, "Thanks," when I got on the empty elevator. When I was in my late sophomore through my junior year of high school, I was diagnosed with insomnia. I would sleep maybe an hour or 2 every 24-hour period, with sporadic binge sleeping rather randomly. Anyway, being awake all the time essentially made me alone a lot. So, one summer, I decided to walk to a gas station near my house to get a Gatorade or some shit. It's about 2 a.m. No one is awake in my house, so I just walk out. I am arriving at the gas station after a pretty uneventful walk and I am approaching that glow from the overhead lights, so things on the far edges are visible, but illuminated very poorly. This gas station has a really steep drive to enter from the main road. The part one was walking up, and the other end has a small pothole-filled parking lot with a narrow little alley that leads to an avenue. As a relative side note, I grew up in a very average middle-class neighborhood. Not a suburb, not inner city, and really closer to a country town neighborhood than anything I guess. Anyway, I start heading towards the front door and in my peripheral vision, something moves in the darkness. So, not being very suspicious, because I feel safe in my neighborhood, I lazily turn to look. I can make out the shape of a person and they're very rapidly materializing from out of the dark. It's a kid, probably a little older than me, and he is on a pretty fast clip jog. He jogs right up to me and stops about half an arm's length away. We just stare at each other. The weird thing though is that his upper lip is essentially shredded off, like he fell off a motorcycle or something, and bleeding. He was also bleeding out of his nose, and his lower left eyelid was drooping down and full of blood. He had a bunch of blood splattered on his white tee too, as if he had sneezed or something. I began to say something, but before I could utter one syllable, he just moved to my left and continued running. Without saying a word, I went in, got my drink, walked home. I was waiting to hear about it in the news the next day. I didn't, so, while hanging with a close friend, I mentioned what had happened. We mulled it over for a bit, and then, he suggested something. He knew it was a wild shot in the dark, but he suggested that that kid didn't exist, and that I just really needed sleep. I hadn't even thought of that, and to this day I don't know. I work alone for 12 hours entirely alone on an office floor doing IT. It's absolutely wonderful, I don't have to deal with anyone directly. However, sometimes I do feel like that CDC scientist from the finale of Season 1 of Walking Dead. There are cubicles, meeting rooms and office space for a few hundred people, but I am the only one here. If it weren't for all the moaning undead on the streets below, you would almost feel entirely alone. Please like and subscribe to support this channel. One of my friends had a job in the hospital looking after patients, making beds, etc. I heard he randomly quit his job, wouldn't talk to anyone about it. I bring some beers over to